Good Sunday to you all, or is it a good Wednesday? Who knows? Let's just say good week. Welcome back to the SAP's podcast. This is Season 1, Episode 9 of The Leftovers, the Garveys at their best. And some may say this is the programme at its best. We'll see. We'll see what the other guys think, but I'm, of course, one of your co-hosts, Sam, joined by my two frankly miraculous co-hosts, Ant.
I think we have to determine, is this the podcast at its best, this episode as well? That's something we're going to have to let the viewers decide, aren't we?
Well, Ant is on it, so it's doubtful. And your other co-host, Phil. Yeah, that's Phil laughing in the background. He can't even introduce himself. Yep, this definitely is the podcast at its best.
It's a good start. It's a good start, everyone.
This is the podcast running as a well-oiled machine. So if it breaks down, it's literally just like
Ant's
the worst
fault.
thing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But as always, we've got the three of us trying to break down a very complex episode. We'll do our best, and you know what? I'm sure you can expect quite a bit of sandwich talk in this as well. Do you know what I mean? Meaty points. Although I would say, boys, I was thinking we do talk about, oh, that was a nice juicy meaty point, or that was a bit of a bready point, but we do neglect the other parts of the sandwich. No one says, oh, that was a nice saucy point. That was a nice spread. That was a nice bit of crunch in there. So,
that was a nice gherkin.
Yeah, exactly.
Garnish.
Exactly, maybe. Mate, I was thinking that when we saw Kevin running, but anyway, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into breaking down Season 1, Episode 9. So the opening was very reminiscent to the pilot episode with Kevin going on a jog. I think he was even wearing the same grey attire that was, showing off his package. Let's not beat around the bush. But the world seems just fuller, like there seems more people about, because I think in the pilot, Kevin doesn't encounter anyone until he encounters the dog, but here he's waving at people and all that kind of thing. It just seems like a very different world. And whilst he's going on a jog, he stops off at a mailbox and he pulls a cigarette from his little secret stash, and we hear things like the dogs barking in the background, and then you've got the post box which links in with the earlier episode, and then again another strong link with an earlier episode. He notices a deer staring straight at him.
Off the bat, I'm going to say that I thought it was a bit of a masterstroke that they put this flashback episode, as the penultimate one of the season, because often you'll have a couple of episodes and then kind of the flashback. But because it was so late on, I felt like it held a lot more weight because you're more invested in the characters and the references will make more sense. Mm-hmm. So, when he's jogging past, I presume it's the same dry cleaners. He sees the two Chinese ladies, I think they are, and there's two of them. I think in the pilot you only see the one, and there's a big mural of the one that's gone. Obviously the link with the Tom hiding the money into the mailbox. I did think... so Kevin obviously used to smoke, and from my knowledge, he doesn't smoke anymore in like the present day. So did he give up because of the GR, using it as one of their what's the word? Using it as one of their activities, if you like. I mean, we did have that lingering bottom to top shot of like Kevin in his jogging pants, so it wasn't all
Sam's favourite.
You could see his huge willy, which was which was nice.
Say it how it is, Ant.
And and I mean, at the end, it was really on the nose, wasn't it? With the deer, in the background, in the distance, with the lighting coming through, it looked very otherworldly for sure. But from the off, I did kind of see Kevin jogging, and it took me a minute to realise it was set in the past. But I really like the opening and really like where they're going with the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've raised a lot of good points there, and I'm sort of almost surprised. But this
almost.
But no, there are some really good points there. With him jogging, the fact you seeing like little things like him waving at people as they're going past. You don't see him do that in the future episode, so I didn't realise immediately that it was a past episode.
I was going to say, actually, how quickly did you guys cotton on? Like, Ant, when you was watching this opening scene, did you realise straight away, oh, this isn't the past? Or is it only with future context?
I think it was. I think I had an inkling, but I wasn't 100%.
Right.
I had an inkling when he kind of stops and starts smoking. That was it. That was the moment. It was like, oh, this isn't. So at first I wasn't sure if they're trying to show the world slightly bright, because he's with Nora or something. But as soon as he started smoking, it's like, oh right, I think this might be the past. That's when it switched over.
Because I remember when I first watched it, that when I first saw him smoking, I was thinking that, because obviously the last episode ended with Jill kind of turning up at the Guilty Remnant. Is he starting to take on sort of Guilty Remnant characteristics or, idiosyncrasies, that kind of thing? Obviously, that thought didn't last for very long because it quickly becomes apparent, but that's what I was thinking, like, right at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I said I didn't think it was quite... I didn't pick up on GR tendencies at that point. But what I did like, and it goes back to what Ant was saying, the otherworldly kind of imagery of the deer. I like how it kind of sets up for Kevin's relationship with the deer in future episodes. In the first episode of the season, for example, the deer behind the bush, the deer being hit by the car, the deer being torn apart by dogs at the end. I like how they've kind of set that up quite early in this episode.
Yeah.
And with the otherworldly kind of lighting that you're talking about, and you actually see that quite a bit throughout the series, predominantly almost as if like it's like, I always think of it as like light coming through like a church window or something, is how I think of it. That's how the light always reminds me of. And
through
you see
this episode, you mean?
Well, actually you see it throughout the season. So for instance, in the last episode, when Kevin's putting the dinner, at the start of the episode, when Kevin's putting the dinner together, putting all the glasses out, putting the tablecloth over, the light is doing exactly the same thing over his shoulder. It's almost identical kind of lighting, if that makes sense. So, and you actually see that a few times throughout the episode, throughout the season.
It's quite a heavenly image, isn't it? Like the light coming in over the sky, and then with what we'll discuss about the deers and Kevin later on in the episode, the fact that this light is coming over the deer and has previously been over Kevin seems like quite a strong link, I must say.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, I always think of it as light through a church window. But yeah. So you see it throughout. So it's consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like the point actually, Phil, that you've put in the doc that I'll kind of steal and bring up. But hey, I'm giving you credit. But
referenced.
Like you can tell how different things are from pre-departure to how things are now. So it kind of shows just how far the world's fallen. But when I saw that, well, it just made me think of is that like. Because, the world has fallen so far, but that it hasn't taken that much. And what I mean by that is obviously, like, if the departure happened in real life, it was like a huge event. But if you was to look at things coldly, if you said 2% of the world's population disappears, you would think, okay, but life would still go on. But just because of the nature of kind of like humanity and our need for explanations and all that kind of things, like we've discussed in previous episodes, people just can't get over it. And it's only taken a slight push just to kind of just mess everything up now.
I suppose there's something else that's worth thinking about, although not too hard. If 2% of the world's population have disappeared, what else has happened that we just don't know about? And it's fully possible that it's not just humans disappearing. It could have been other stuff, and whether it be differences in, I know this is going to be a bit of a stretch now, but difference in kind of weather and physics and all the rest of it. I'm sure they probably won't explore it in the show, but it's definitely interesting to see just how the world's changed.
Possibly, Ant, because bear in mind they say throughout this episode, gosh, it's really hot for for this time of year. It's October and actually having a heat wave and things. But as I said I think it's like the third episode of this podcast, was there like, well, it always seems very dreary and very cold or very wintry throughout this whole season. So I think you're right. I think this may go past just 2% of the world's population disappearing. There may be other side effects. Maybe,
or like to me, I just think that's just tends to be like not so subtle. I don't know, imagery from the writers. Do you know what I mean? Just that, look how dreary it is now, and look how bright it was before, and let's just explain it away with a heat wave. But you never know. You never know.
Yeah, no, I am leaning towards you, Sam. By the way, I'm just saying, just in general. I'd like to almost go into that into the world and have all the answers and then know what else changed. You know?
I mean, we've got enough mystery already, haven't we? If they started going on about the rest of the world, this podcast would be about 4 hours long every week. But so Kevin then rolls back to his house, which is obviously completely different to the one that he's currently living in. Very white, very bright, as opposed to kind of the brown, dreary colours in his normal house. Apologies if you've got a lot of brown in your house. In fact, I've got quite a bit of brown in my house. Anyway, let's move on. But so here, Laurie's still at home, and obviously she's talking, and so it's clear now that this is, in fact, before the departure.
It's weird, wasn't it, to hear Laurie talk? I mean, I'm saying this point, amongst my bright white walls, Sam, just to let you know. But it was interesting, wasn't it, to see the different house, very big, very modern. It's very clear throughout the episode that Laurie's raking it in.
She's doing well, isn't she?
And on the surface, they look like they're doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. It seemed like a much brighter, bigger house, lots of light, and just very simple things like very colourful. So things like like lots of fruit all over the place. The fridge is fully stocked. It seems like when we're introduced to this episode, it seems like everything's perfect. Everything's bright, everything's colourful, everything's going well. The offer of French toast, what appears to be a very healthy relationship. So it the premise it sets up as everything is fine, everything is perfect.
And I think that's something that we'll keep coming back to in this episode, is that like on the surface, looking at things, you'd think that, things were great before the departure, but then just as the episode goes on, it shows that no, like, all these people had problems like before the departure. The departure, as we said earlier, just kind of tips everything over the edge then. But like I say, we'll get into that quite a bit as this episode goes on. So Kevin and Laurie are discussing about getting a puppy potentially, and then they're organising a party for Garvey Senior. And Jill comes into the scene, and she's just like unrecognisable, kind of like in her personality, coming down, singing, and just seems like overall just a very happy teenage girl, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does. She seems a completely different person to who we see throughout the rest of the season. I'm almost quite impressed, because I did wonder how they're going to make her look younger, because she's already quite a young-looking person, but they did a good job with the braces and things.
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
But yeah, you're absolutely right. She's singing, she's smiling, she's got braces on. She seems much happier. Her relationship with her parents seem much healthier. Kind of talking to them or saying goodbye to them. But what I did wonder was the first instance of things going wrong in this scene. And it's when you see he looks up and he sees there's a crack going down towards a picture, and he then tries to straighten up the picture. And I got is he just, quite an obvious attempt to cover over the cracks and just failing? Yeah. And actually this is the first sign something's wrong.
I mean, with that kind of thing, like, this programme is absolutely brilliant, lots of difficult imagery to crack and, symbolism, that kind of thing. But some things are just pretty clear, aren't they? And I think...
very on the nose.
Pretty on the nose, that's it, yeah.
I mean, Phil, great point. I think my just observation will be, obviously you've got Kevin at present with a dog he didn't want, and now he's on about getting a dog, and, he's not... You can kind of imply early on that he's not overly keen on it. It's more Laurie's thing. But, I think he's already forgetting stuff, so I don't know if he's just generally a bit ditzy, or if it's the mental illness / medication already, those effects already kind of seeping through.
I think it is. I think it is an early attempt to kind of show things are slightly unbalanced. But with him forgetting the breeders, things like that, I think it was quite a good early sign of things going wrong.
It wasn't like Laurie leaving and the effects of the departure tipped Kevin over the edge. He was probably already on the way before. I think that's what they were trying to show, perhaps.
Yeah. Absolutely. And seemingly even before Garvey Senior starts showing signs, because obviously we're not in Garvey Senior's head quite as much as we are with Kevin's, if you know what I mean. We don't spend as much time with him. But Kevin seems to be showing quite a lot of the things that he's showing in the modern day, if you like, in the present episodes, say like the previous one, with his potential mental illness. He's showing those kinds of signs even now, like over 3 years ago. So no, it's definitely...
I mean that's a good point, isn't it? Because when you see Garvey Senior later, if he was displaying any of those signs of talking to voices, etc., no doubt he probably wouldn't have had the party and the level of respect he's still got and the influence in the police department.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, everyone seems to absolutely love him, don't they? Like, no signs, no one's kind of questioning him like at all in this episode.
So whether it was like a trigger with Garvey Senior, I don't know. I presume we'll find out, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Mate, I can't wait to see what happens here. So next,
who would say something so stupid?
Pretty sure you did, Phil.
I don't know. Who would start a podcast with someone who says things like that? I don't know. Right. Anyway, so
terrible life choices.
Oh dear.
This podcast was my idea.
And we agreed to it. We are complicit. But anyway, so we get a glimpse of Nora's life previous, obviously before the departure, when she's there with the family. And to someone who hadn't watched any of The Leftovers before and knew anything, if you was just to take what's happened so far in with Nora and Kevin, you'd seem like, oh, they've got great lives, seemingly loving families, everything's great. But we know that's not the case, and like Ant said earlier on, because we've spent so much time with these characters already, when the husband comes in and speaks to Nora, and he seems pretty good with the kids, and I think he kind of makes her laugh, and you think like, oh, he seems like a good guy, and then you remember, oh no, this is the guy that was cheating on her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Particularly the scenes with Nora, with the kids. I mean, early on in this scene, I believe they're talking about a job interview, and the husband's very supportive, and it seems to all be going all very well. And although it was nice to see Nora in that situation, because we're not used to her being happy that much. I know she met Kevin and cheered up a bit, and she got fully cleansed by Holy Wayne. Sorry, I missed that part.
That's it. Come on, give Holy Wayne the credit he deserves.
Yeah, but it was still harrowing, wasn't it, and disturbing to see her like that, knowing what's to come. But yeah, I can only go back to my first point. Really, it's just a masterstroke them putting this episode so late in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so well. The fact. It was a great way of showing just how much Nora had lost personally. It's quite clear, like, her children, her family and her children especially are central to her life. She hasn't worked in a long time. When she talks to the mayor, she says, I just need something for myself, which just shows how much she gave to her family, being the mother, being a wife, lunch, breakfast, everything she was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you didn't already feel like tremendously sorry for Nora, before this episode, I mean, it's just a real gut punch, isn't it? And you just feel even more sorry for her than you already do. It's this program can be pretty tough to watch at times. So next we see Laurie in her profession, and she's working as some kind of therapist, psychotherapist maybe, I'm not quite sure. But she's been getting calls from her doctor, and she's basically ducking her current doctor's appointment. We're not sure what for yet, but don't worry, we will find out. Don't worry. Fucking hell, I don't know what happened to me there.
You did sound a bit broken. Like, whoa.
Oh my god! I don't know why this bit's taking me so long. So I've got to ask you guys. So on Laurie's daily calendar, there's like a kind of inspirational quote on there, or seemingly inspirational. I think it's meant to be, but I don't know. It doesn't seem that happy. But the quote is, "The foot feels the foot when it feels the ground." So my interpretation of that is that kind of humans need something external outside of themselves to gain some sort of feeling. Because the foot only feels itself when it touches the ground, something outside, so that, humans just on their own, say if someone's lonely or that kind of thing, that they're not getting the full experience almost.
I saw it quite similar to what you've said, Sam, but I saw it more as you only really truly know yourself when you're actually faced with resistance. So it's not so much just requiring other things to feel, but actually, the challenges that you'll go through, the struggles that you'll have. For example, we'll see this throughout the episode with quite a few different characters and the struggles that they have and how that kind of directly impacts back and that makes them actually assess their own lives. Things that Laurie will go through this episode that will make her feel, estranged from her from Kevin, and from her family. Things that Kevin will go through that will again challenge his kind of view on his perfect life. And you'll see that there's quite a few people. So that's how I saw the quote meaning.
That's deep,
Sure.
bro. That's deep.
I think, yeah, obviously there's no right or wrong answer. The way I interpreted it was more that you need to be, so you're talking about the foot being on the ground, so in other words you need to be rooted and on a path, so people need to be moving forward in their lives, and perhaps Laurie feels like she isn't, so although her career's going well, her personal life, well, her marriage isn't. And then another interpretation could be that you need to be part of something bigger, obviously the ground, being the earth and the planet, and maybe it's kind of alluding to the fact that she doesn't have that feeling of that kind of tribal collectiveness. So that's maybe a hint that she might join the GR. Obviously, we know she does, but she needs to feel part of something a bit bigger. Just a completely different point is that there's in Laurie's office you see a little red light come on. I believe when the next client's ready in the waiting room, and I thought that the imagery was somewhat similar to the traffic light incident in Matt's solo episode in episode 3, but I don't think there's a massive degree of symbolism there. I just thought it was quite interesting.
No, yeah, you can't help but think of that episode, like you say, but struggling to kind of find the link, as you say. So yeah, maybe one to keep an eye on, or maybe not. To be fair, let's just move on. But so we see that actually the client waiting to see Laurie is actually Patty, which I think we kind of knew before. Kind of. I'm not quite sure if it's fully confirmed, but it is now.
Yeah, I was unaware of what you just said, but it was interesting to see the reversal of roles. So obviously pre-departure, Laurie's the influencer, the authority, if you like, and Patty's coming to her for help. And then obviously post, it's completely flipped, with Patty being the leader of the GR. And then obviously following her death, I know Laurie assumes like de facto control. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was. It's quite nice to see that role reversal. We knew they did have a relationship prior to the departure, and that I know they said they'd tell each other everything, which is quite interesting. But I did quite like, it's only minor, but I did quite like the phrasing of, I liked how Laurie dropped in the ready before, I think, because we see that so many times throughout later episodes, kind of the question on the notepad, ready. And I know she puts as part of a sentence, but I thought that was quite well just, sneaked in there.
It is one of them, like with this episode, that there's so many things in it where, even just little things like that, it doesn't really mean that much, but it's just a callback to previous episodes. It almost seems like every line at one point, and as I'm making the notes in the doc, I'm like, okay, do I mention all of these? And we will go for 4 hours or not, but it's brilliant writing. It really, really is.
Yeah.
But so next we see that Jill and Kevin have got seemingly a pretty good relationship at this point. They're driving along in the car, Jill seems really happy, but there does seems to be like the early signs of a potential rift coming in when Jill says to Kevin, it's something like, no dad, you just don't get it. And obviously she's just talking about this stupid cat video or something, but that is how she feels in the current day as well. Like that Kevin just doesn't understand her, and I think that most people just don't understand her. I mean, we've seen her problems with Amy, haven't we? And I think Jill does feel quite misunderstood.
Yeah, I mean, it explains why she goes and joins I say joins, but certainly goes to the GR at the end of the last episode, because she doesn't feel like anyone understands. And maybe that's why she's gone to go see and join her mum. What I thought was interesting here, she goes, you're right, I think when she says, you don't get it, I think you're right. I think that's a bit of foreshadowing of actually you're not getting Jill at all later on. But what I did quite like was, she goes, you smell like cigarettes. And I was thinking about this earlier. Surely Laurie would have noticed that he'd been smoking. Because I know you see him use mouthwash, you see him wash his hands with some hand gel. But, it would be on his clothes and everything. And if Jill can still smell cigarettes now, then Laurie must have noticed this early. So either she's aware that he has been smoking and not addressing it because she wants to give the appearance that everything's fine, or she doesn't mind Kevin having his, his perceived dirty little secret, and it really doesn't matter that much.
I think it's definitely the former, because it's what we see just all the time throughout this series, particularly with Kevin, but quite a lot of the Garveys, where they're just not addressing the problems. It's like the kind of thing where if Laurie would just like come straight out with it at the start, not make a big deal of it, but just like, look, I know you had a cigarette, it's fine. You could just sort it, but because things aren't mentioned, and then when something else happens, so like when she gets annoyed at Kevin later on, and then she'll bring up the cigarette thing as well.
Yeah.
It's just like the typical signs of like when a relationship, not even necessarily a romantic one, but just between people, starts to break down when they aren't open with each other, and then like everything just comes out in one then.
Yeah, there's a lot of point scoring, isn't there? But they're keeping it in the locker, and they'll use it when the time suits them. I mean, for me, I've stated in previous episodes, Jill's not my favourite character, but when you can see the major shift in her personality, obviously she's very happy now. I probably wouldn't read too much into her little rift with Kevin, because it just seems like something fairly normal that she'd say, Dad, you don't get it. And when she addresses, that he smells like cigarettes, it's all done quite upbeat. But when you see how she's after, it only goes to show like how hard she took the departure and the how people change, like with Laurie leaving and her dad going off the rails somewhat. And I think Jill needed that in this episode for me to be a bit more invested in her, because she was my least favourite character before.
No, that's all fair. But I think, like you say, it's not actually just the departure that she can't deal with. It's the effect. It's the after effects, isn't it? Which is just what I love about this program. To be honest, I know I say that every week, but the program isn't about the departure and what happened and all that kind of thing. It's about the aftermath of it, and I just love that kind of little twist on the idea. But so in the next scene, we see Kevin, and he's still studying that cat video from before. But then he starts hearing a commotion in a school, and like the kids are screaming and running out. And then he obviously like charges in there, and you see there's like loads of blood on one of the doors, and like loads of the rooms in the school are just trashed. And it turns out it was yet another rampant deer, which again is a callback to I think the pilot episode when a deer went into Kevin's kitchen and just trashed the place. Then
yes. Yeah, I think it is a bit of a callback to kind of show, as I said, I mentioned earlier, that like this deer keeps turning up at episodes, and it seems to have a deeper meaning for Kevin. What I did like is it's quite subtle, but I like the fact, as you mentioned, that he's still studying the cat video. I like the fact that in this scene he's actually trying to get it. I know it sounds as weird as it sounds, like he's watching it and he's not enjoying what he's seeing, but at least he's trying, if that makes sense, to relate to something with Jill. And kind of go back later on and go, actually, I did actually understand that. We'll try and understand her a little bit better.
Yeah, because we don't see that kind of effort being made, do we, in the present day?
No, later on he stops trying to do that. So it just shows who he was before.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because there isn't really anything to get. And, I don't know how old Jill is at that point. Is she like 14? Something like that? 14?
Yeah, 15? I'd guess 14 or 15.
Around that age.
Yeah.
It's almost like... It seems like that humour is almost a little bit younger than how old she is now, so maybe she's a tad immature. I don't know.
Sorry, just before you make your point, you just saying then that maybe there is nothing to get about that video. It sparked a thought in my mind where, how we're saying that everybody's looking for meaning in the departure and trying to explain it and everything. But maybe that's like a little microcosm there, what you've just said, where it's like, there is nothing to get, it just happened. It was just almost like the universe just coming into existence. It just happened, and there is no meaning behind it, no purpose. I don't know why that just sparked that thought.
That's quite a meaty point, actually. That's quite a juicy.
So that's a combined, like I'm bringing, the thick sausage, and Sam's bringing the sauce.
Come on, mate. Mate, that's like you just turned on the oven and then I did the rest. You
preheated the oven.
I set you up there. Hang on, you actually interrupted me. You didn't know what I was going to say.
Well, I know it weren't that.
As good as Sam's point.
So before I was interrupted rudely.
Yeah, come on, take it away. Follow that up.
Before the bun came out the oven.
No, my point was actually totally unrelated. About the filming technique. When Kevin was running into the school, they did the shaky cam. I thought it was really effective to show the panic. And really early on in the series, we were questioning whether the deer was real or not. And I believe this is the first time that we really get acknowledgement from other characters that it is real. It's not just a figment of Kevin's mind, because they refer to it as causing trouble in the school. So, is that right, Sam? That's the first instance.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think generally it's just Kevin seeing the deer, isn't it? And then obviously does the DK turn up? The dog killer turn up?
Yeah, but the dogs kill it at the end of episode 1.
So you're right, because I made the point in episode 2 when he's, Penguin 1 S0, when talking about the psychologist doesn't mention the deer. He only mentions the dogs. Yeah. But then also thinking about it, that you see there's deers in the background on the cabin wall.
There's deer, Phil.
No, there's 2 deer. Do you remember we talk about this, because we even said that represents the 2% that have departed? In the last episode, we talk about the fact there's 2, I don't know if it's 2 sets of antlers or 2 deer in the cabin in Cairo.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it was just interesting to see confirmation that the deer is real, because I know in episode 1 you kind of see it in the background, it's all a bit out of place, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next.
That's it. No, all the stuff with the deer is going to start coming together a bit more as we get more into this episode. But so in Patty's session with Laurie, she says that she's got a feeling that something terrible's about to happen. But Laurie kind of says, well, what makes it different this time? So clearly she said it many times before. And Patty says that she thinks the world's about to end, and this is actually in the present day what she insists. It's kind of like the GR mantra, isn't it? That the world ended after the departure. So is she kind of projecting onto the departure? Potentially. But Laurie thinks her feelings are because of Patty's separation from her husband, Neil, who was abusive in the past. And Laurie says something about like shitting in a bag and putting it on Neil's doorstep. And so then if we go back to the episode before where Laurie and Patty had the night in the motel, that sounds a bit... yeah, when they stayed in separate rooms in the motel, and then Patty ends up putting a plastic bag, doesn't she, with Neil's name in it on his doorstep. I presume she hadn't shit in that one, because Laurie might have been a bit like, what's going on? We see where that idea's come from.
She wouldn't have said anything.
It's true. You can't call it out, can you?
Was it a doggy bag? Just to link in with the overall theme.
Oh, go away, Anne. Get in the bin, man. Get in the bin.
Anyway, just on, I think the most interesting point there is that, Patty's feeling of a sense of impending doom. Do we think that she's got some sort of prophetic ability, or do we think it's just coincidence that she feels like something's going to happen? Because she doesn't explicitly state what's going to happen. She just has a feeling something will, and whether she does have some otherworldly ability or not, I suppose is something we can discuss. But I guess as well, are other people feeling this as well? She can't be the only person on the planet who feels like that, and wonder what that sensation is like. And obviously, I think it's the first time anyone's really alluded to it. Well, I suppose this is actually the first time we've seen anything pre-departure, but. The fact that they can almost feel like it's happening, I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, you're right. It's the first time anyone out and out states something is wrong. It's the first time someone makes any kind of inference that something bad might happen. I watched it and took it and saw it more as her just being paranoid and her projecting her paranoia onto other people. So, when she kind of challenges Laura, like, oh, I know you feel it too. Well, we know Laurie is actually feeling that something is wrong, but that's because we know what's wrong with... Well, I assumed what was wrong with Laurie from the previous episode, previous scenes. So I don't think it was so much that she is having any kind of prophecy, because no one else alludes to there being a problem or something bad about to happen. I just saw it more of paranoia.
Well, later on, there are some people who predict that, but yeah, I see the point, Phil.
Well, I think it's one of them, isn't it? If you think about it, like in real life, there are kind of doom-mongerers who predict the end of the world, but say if something did actually happen, like, would you then look at them and be like, oh, see, they were right all along, or is it just like, it's just...
I suppose it depends how specific they were. A lot of them tend to be very specific about what will happen, like with the rapture.
Yeah.
They're very specific. Whereas Patty's just like, oh, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
That's it,
bit,
isn't it? Yeah.
It does make you think.
Yeah, because Laura even tries to explain it out as it being anxiety over her ex-husband. So she tries to rationally explain it, doesn't she?
And I mean, like we was talking last week about Patty potentially being some sort of, I don't know, maybe some sort of supernatural influence, weren't we? Like in trying to get Kevin into the game, if you like. So I don't know. Potentially, she could actually know something's coming, or she could just, like I say, get lucky, if you like, with a little prediction. But Patty, I think Phil alluded to this earlier, but she does kind of insist to Laurie that Laurie can feel the trouble coming too, and she says that something is wrong inside you. And, hint, for what we're going to see later in the episode. But Laurie just denies it, like, straight up, even though she knows it's true as well. Next, we see Nora at work. She's having a job interview to be a kind of like campaign advisor for the lady who turns out to be the future mayor. And Nora says that for the purposes of this job, the next 4 weeks, it's like she doesn't have a family. Ouch. Yeah, yikes. And then Garvey Sr. kind of comes into the scene, and we see him doing a bit of flirting with the mayor, and you can tell she likes him. He's got the charm.
Yeah, exactly. I had to laugh when, after they've had their little interaction, and she's just there like, oh, we're just friends, and I was there like, oh, is that so? We're just friends. I was like, you can tell. But what I also liked, and I didn't make this point in the document, was just how much important honesty must have seemed to be to Garvey Senior. Because he says hire her after she says there's no way that the lady who does become the mayor can beat the other person.
Sure.
But also I wonder if that's why he likes Matt so much, because what Matt does is he just kind of, with his flyers, just says the absolute truth. Kind of the people. This is how terrible a person this other person is, and it's just complete truth that he puts, and doesn't put any allusion to, this person was a good person.
Just straight facts.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder if that's actually very important to Garvey Senior, and actually helps explain a little bit more why he gives Matt the money in a previous episode.
Sure.
Just a little thing.
Mm. Yeah, it's very on the nose, isn't it? Like, for these 4 weeks I have no family. There's lots of subtle hints throughout the leftovers, but this one not so much. And just quite a funny point is that when they're talking about how the mayor's got no chance, she's a potential mayor at that point, it does make you think, did the other candidate disappear?
yeah.
And then it was only that made her get it, because I think I'm not quite sure it's as far as implying that's what happened, but you could probably read into it that way, couldn't you?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if the mayor's in any of Matt's flyers, actually. I'm trying to think if he is on any of those.
Maybe you've stumbled upon something there. Who knows? But anyway, yeah, no, I think you might have stumbled upon a little thing there, Ad, to be fair, so fair play to you. So at work, Kevin's mug just seems to be like inexplicably leaking from the bottom. There doesn't seem to be a crack on there. And Garvey Sr., obviously he's the police chief at the moment, mentions the deer issue that the town of Mapleton has. And Garvey Sr. insists that they should kill it, but Kevin kind of bites back and says, like, no, that they don't have to. And it's quite interesting when Garvey Sr. says that if it's dangerous and unstable, then yeah, they do need to kill it. Where, if you was to look at Garvey Sr. particularly in the present day, and Kevin's definitely going that way, I think you would say that they're quite both dangerous and unstable, given that Garvey Sr. likes to go around beating people up when he's after his National Geographic magazines and that kind of thing. So yeah, every line's just got like these levels to it in this episode.
It does make you think, why does Kevin care so much about keeping the deer alive? Is it just the fact that he likes animals, or is it somewhat deeper, and there is that link there between his mental health and the deer, and he wants to protect it? I think it's the latter, personally. And just on the mug as well, I mean, it's almost like there's a little pin prick at the bottom of the mug, and it's leaking out of that, which is a very unusual way for a mug to leak. And the fact that it says "My Hero" on the mug, I mean, you've got the symbolism all over, haven't you? You could imply that it's him to his family. It could even be his dad.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to come in again because this keeps happening in this episode. Ant's saying things and it's sparking thoughts off in my mind. But when you're saying that there's just a tiny little hole, but then you see how much is spilling out, again, you could kind of compare that to the departure. You know,
see, we make a good team, Sam.
Mate, that's it. That's it. You got no idea what you're talking about, and I'll come in and make the points.
But if I've got no idea what
he's blundering in on these fantastic ideas.
I had a very strong point of my own, and you piggybacked on it. So basically, I'm chipping the ball into the back of the net. It's going to cross the line anyway, but you just head it in just to make sure.
Sure, Ant, sure. Whatever you say, son. No, but like I say, so it does spark that idea in my head again about how it's just this tiny little hole, this little push, and then so much can just go wrong from it.
We never know, Sam. You might spark something in my mind. We never know. We'll have to see.
Mate, but there has to be something going on in your mind for that to happen.
There's clearly enough for you to piggyback off the back of it.
Oh, shut up. Phil, what are you saying?
Did anyone else get the impression that Kate isn't respected by anyone? Like, even his dad didn't really take his suggestions seriously. So, we have the other detective who we know doesn't respect Kevin anyway. We see in past episodes. Yeah. But in this episode, people like roundly mock his idea. Even his dad says, oh, well, everyone else can turn up with a real weapon. And, if you get there first, you can take care of Bambi. It kind of felt very...
Yeah, there is definitely a bit of that, isn't there?
Yeah. Like he was putting him down. Because, like we've said, like things not being how they are on the surface. If you watch, say, the first episode, Kevin, when he rocks up, he's police chief, he's got his Ray-Bans on, he's looking fly, and you'd think, he's like the popular guy, everyone likes him and that kind of thing. And then, like you say, as we're 9 episodes in now, and it's like, even back here, he's kind of getting put down in front of everyone. So no, it's definitely a good point. But so Kevin then gets a call, and it's from Tom, and he's basically been cuffed by a police officer, and somebody's hit him in the head, and Kevin busts round to confront who it was who's done it. It turns out it was actually Tom's birth father, because remember that Kevin isn't his biological dad, and his birth father basically just says that he's got no interest in Tom and that he just keeps turning up and that kind of thing. But because of the way that I presume he's hit Tom, Kevin then knees him straight in the gut and tells him that it'll kill him if he ever touches his kid again. And then, this guy's other kid, who's probably 10, if not younger, is standing there watching this. And Kevin doesn't cover himself in any kind of glory in this episode. And even though, you think he's standing up for his kid, he's just not a good role model at all. Like, this is not how you deal with these kinds of situations,
He's a police officer, isn't he? He shouldn't just be beating. We see him beat people up later on, but he shouldn't be doing it now either.
Yeah, exactly. that links in, doesn't it? What we said in previous episodes, just that complete abuse of power. Like again, it's here, plain as day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a bit of a grey moment, isn't it? Because you can probably just about see Kevin's point of view, because this guy clearly hasn't been giving Tom answers, and he did hit him. It's not implied, I don't think, that Tom strikes first, so potentially. The real dad hit him first, but to do it in front of the kid is definitely bad. There was a bit of a smirk as well from the biological dad when Kevin leaves, so it kind of implies he's a bit of a sort, a bit of a character.
I didn't see that, interestingly. I saw you put that in the comment. I rewatched. I didn't get the implication of him smiling. I only saw him look at his son to try and reassure his son, not. I don't know if you saw it, Sam. I was interested to see if I missed something there.
No, I do agree. Actually, I didn't see like a smirk as if like he's enjoying what's going on. Like
I don't think he enjoyed it. I think it's more of a he's the kind of guy who abandons, his child. So that probably points, the way towards his morality a little bit. And he's like, he's just like, yeah, whatever. Like, yeah, you'll come round, do stuff. Yeah, I'm just not affected. I've got my life now.
Possibly. I said I just saw it more as him trying to reassure his
it's probably
his son who watched.
It might have been a bit of both.
Just got beaten around.
Yeah, no, I agree. You can see it both ways. When I think Ant said, was it Ant or Phil just said it? I'm not sure, but saying like it's a bit of a grey moment. I think the motivations, maybe you could kind of get there, like why you would feel angry, but then actually going round and doing that, I would say that's going quite a lot more to being a dark moment than a grey moment, really. But anyway, moving on. So we see Laurie at a puppy breeder's. As we spoke about earlier, they're thinking about getting a dog, and it turns out the puppy breeder is actually Gladys. And Laurie's having a nice little cuddle with the doggo, and then she starts kind of breaking down, crying.
Yeah, I'd wondered when Gladys was talking. Oh, it's her third litter, and I was wondering if that was kind of hinting at, if you hadn't already guessed what's going on with Laurie, if that was kind of a bit of a subtle hint. Then also she follows it with, also, the children don't need the mother anymore. I was kind of wondering if that was almost like a two kind of bits there. A, hinting at what's going on with Laurie, was saying it's the third litter, and then B, oh, they don't need the mother anymore, and maybe explaining why Laurie's starting to feel a bit out of place in her family.
That's really good, Phil, to draw the link, because it'd be Laurie's third child. We know what happens later in the episode, and saying that they don't need the mother anymore. The link is there, so fair play to you.
Thanks.
I mean, talking about not so subtle foreshadowing, I mean, like, particularly on a rewatch thing, like, they are just beating you over the head with it, like, in what Laurie's problem is going to be. I mean, did you guys pick up beforehand, before getting the confirmation later on, that Laurie is in fact pregnant again?
I guessed...
No, not until the end.
I guessed pregnant when she said, but we're running out, time's running out on the options. So, when the doctor... At that point, I was like, oh, I'm guessing she's pregnant there, because...
Sure.
Yeah, because I know you only have so long before you make decisions.
But, so we then see all the Garveys together, and, on the surface, again, looking at it, if you didn't know anything about these people, you'd think they all seem really happy, but we know that Tom and Kevin and Laurie are all keeping secrets from each other. So Tom and Kevin with the stuff about Tom's biological dad, Kevin with all, the cigarettes and just everything else going on with him, Laurie with her pregnancy. Like I say, like, under the surface, even pre-departure, like, there's the serious problems going on here.
Yeah, you can see how close Jill was to her mum, and how her leaving clearly affected her a lot. And they do have problems between them, but I personally didn't think it was like that much of a big deal. Do you see what I mean? I think every family's got their problems. I never really... If that was the first episode for me in the series, I wouldn't have gone, oh yeah, they're all going to break down and fall apart. We can only say that now because we know what happens. But I'm like, okay, well, Tom's got a problem with his real dad. Fair enough. Jill doesn't quite connect in the things they like with her dad. That's fair. There's a few problems in the marriage. Okay, I'm not like, oh my god, they're all gonna just go on completely different paths.
That is fair. Hindsight is 20/20, definitely. Well, what do you reckon, Phil?
Yeah, if this had been like one of the opening scenes, for example, I'd just seen this as like a relatively, it's nice to see the family all together. I think it's the first time we've seen everyone together in the same room. Jill, Kevin, Laurie, Tom. But you're right, I would have actually assumed it was a normal family, and we know normal families do have little problems. Sometimes parents not getting on with children, or there's always little things going on. And you're right, up to this point, I wouldn't have perceived it as everything's about to break down. It is purely hindsight 20/20 here.
No, but like, maybe as we've said previously, or as I've said previously, the departure just pushing things over the edge. Like I say, these are all like potentially things that are just normal to go on in a family, like, little minor secrets. Not saying that it's okay, but it's not like you say, earth-shattering or anything at the moment. But then the departure just then pushes everything just over the edge again. So I think I've got to go back to what Ant said, in that it is a masterstroke to have this flashback episode at the end, because I think, as Ant said, we've spent so much time with these characters already, and we know so much about them. It can cause you to overthink it as well. It's like they're playing with you a little bit. Like the writers, they definitely knew exactly what they were doing. So very much fair play to them. I don't suppose you guys have read the book, have you?
No, I haven't. I was thinking I might read it after we've seen after we watch the TV afterwards.
Yeah, because I know that the book only covers the first season. Like, they adapted the first season, I think, because it did well and they enjoyed it. Like, the season 2 and 3 are just completely off base. But I was just thinking then, like, is there a flashback chapter in there? Anyway, not relevant. Let's move on. So then we see Garvey Senior's surprise birthday party, which obviously isn't a surprise. He knows what's going on, and loads of people are there, and just a little interesting thing, like we see Mary before a condition, but it seems like the party's about to go off. Everyone seems pretty happy. So Anthony, you've got a few points to make on this, so take it away.
Yeah, sure. So it's a bit of a headache, isn't it, to process this episode, because you see so many people so happy, or at least happy on the surface. You know, you see 3 generations of the Garvey family. You know, whether Garvey Senior, Kevin and Laurie, and the children all together, all happy, and knowing how it all turns out, it's very impactful. You know, you can see Matt and Mary together dancing, and you know what happens. So it's like, it's a bit hard to process. And then, you know, you've got Lou, you know, just being a prick as always. You know, nothing changes, pre or post departure. And he says something very on the nose yet again, talking about the special relationship between Kevin and the deer. And, you know, it's not so subtle anymore. It's like they've probably done away with subtle notes this episode, and they just want to hit you over the head, like you said, Sam, with quite a few things.
That's it. They want to spell some things out for you.
I also got a much bigger sense of community in this scene. Like, I think it's the first time you see lots of people together. Like, even in town hall meetings, for example, it always seems quite sparsely populated. But this party seems absolutely rammed.
It's going off, isn't it? Yeah.
We saw quite a few opposing the curfew as well, I guess.
Oh, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
true.
you're right, actually, yeah.
No, but it is a good point that, like, they do a great job of making the world seem somewhat empty, and you know, even though there's only 2%, it's still hundreds of millions of people, but it is only 2%. But they do a great job of just making you seem like something is just completely off in all the different episodes. But then this just seems like normal times. But as we've said, because we know these characters, we know underneath, it ain't all so good. But so next we see Nora, and she's tucking one of her kids into bed, and then her husband comes back a few hours later, and he says it's because of work, but we know what's going on. We know he's cheating on her, really. And she mentions to him about her job interview and that it went well, and he just kind of basically doesn't care. He's just like, yeah, that's great, and just walks away. So it's like, yeah, what a lovely guy.
It's crazy, isn't it, how different he was in front of the kids, and then, you know, without the kids, acting towards Nora. 1 minute he's like really positive, motivating her to get the job, giving her high fives, and then it's like, I don't care. Yeah. So it just shows that Nora clearly wasn't that happy pre-departure. I know that obviously when you see her at present day, just before she gets healed by Holy Way, and she's talking about how great it was, and I'm not saying that she was unhappy, but she clearly probably wasn't as happy as could have been, if that makes sense. Like, you know, she's dealing with the kids and the problems with the husband. So it's interesting they put that spin on it and really fleshed it out after what Matt was saying when he was trying to get money off her. You know, the kids say some quite interesting things as well. You know, how the deer lost his family, and obviously you know, there's links there with, you know, Kevin losing his family, if Kevin is the deer, and then also linked to the departure, you know, people losing their families in general.
But I did have to think that you're right. I think a lot of this episode shows just how Nora's life wasn't idyllic. Like, it's not quite what she seems to think it was earlier on in the season. But also, it's little things as well, like when she kind of talks to her daughter, like, oh, maybe, but he's not coming back ever again. And you kind of think, yeah, like the daughter, like, you know, the rest of the family almost. It seemed like a bit of a kind of a foreshadowing statement.
They're twisting the knife, aren't they? Like, with all these things with Nora in there, definitely.
Yeah, and when the daughter's getting put to bed and she's like, do you want to sleep with the light on? And she's like, no, I'm not scared anymore. I mean, it's proper harrowing stuff, isn't it? And you feel really sorry for the daughters at that stage. Yeah,
you do. And I think Sam's already touched on the fact that we know the cheeky shot of the dad coming home late because was it an account fell apart or something?
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah,
and he's just there like, oh right. But to be fair, that's almost Nora I could understand Nora not obviously guessing what's up, if that makes sense. Like, it's quite an interesting way of just smoothing over the cracks.
It's fairly typical, isn't it,
for
that kind of job? But again, as we've said, we know we're coming into this with the whole picture, so we can make these links. But obviously, Nora, she's not to know.
But I suppose they obviously disappear at the end of the day.
Yeah. So then back to the party. We just get a little short glimpse of what's going on, and everyone's having a great time. To be fair, seems like the party's going off again on the surface. Everything's great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Exactly. What I like here is it flashes over to Garvey Senior giving a talk on how much he dislikes the judge, because you hear about Garvey Senior being the man of the year, and that the judge that we do see Matt has created flyers about. I think we see it in the second episode. That's the flyers he's handing out, and saying how much he dislikes the judge, even though the judge got the man of the year award the previous year. And so again, I think that creates that nice little link between Garvey Senior and Matt as trying to explain why he's given Matt the money. The fact that Matt is so brutally honest about his opinions on people.
That's a good point. I never made that link.
Yeah.
So
there's definitely something between Garvey Senior and Matt. Maybe we'll learn a bit like that about. Maybe we'll learn a bit about that. In some future episodes, or maybe we won't. Who knows? I might just be lying to you. So then at the party, Matt gives a speech, and he's bigging up Garvey Senior, saying what a great guy he is. And then Kevin follows up with his own little speech, and he talks about how great his family is and how happy he is. But then as they bring out the cake and everyone's attention turns towards that, the camera focuses on him, and he looks like he's actually about to break down. And you can just tell that, as we've said, things are just not so subtle in this episode, and they're showing you even before the departure, all is not well with Kevin, at all. And we know that everyone's already kind of lying to each other. And as we've said earlier, maybe it's just, minor things for the other people, things that aren't potentially family breaking. But here we can see that Kevin just doesn't look happy with his life at all. He seems almost quite detached from them.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was definitely a powerful image, wasn't it? Just him being isolated, even amongst all the people. I fully bought his speech. I think he does think a lot of his dad. I don't think that respect is reciprocated. And, we see after in the next scene when he's out having a cigarette that they're not as close as the speech implies.
Yeah, I got a very similar impression there. And, for instance, after Kevin gives his speech, kind of to family, the cheer it feels relatively half-hearted, the cheer that he gets, especially compared to Matt's speech that he gives prior, where everyone really bigs it up and takes a drink. So I get the impression his respect towards his dad isn't reciprocated, and I don't think Kevin's respected by many people. You have Lou making jokes to Kevin's wife about the deer. We see that a couple of times. We see, Garvey doesn't really say anything back to Kevin after what is a very emotional and heartfelt speech. And then almost they kind of cut across the cheer with bringing the cake out, and you see that moment where it kind of flashes to Kevin when you see everyone immediately almost disregard Kevin and go straight towards the cake and start singing, because he's a jolly good fellow. And then you almost get that kind of shot. I think you get the shot it's just the back of his head. And it just kind of shows just how out of place Kevin feels amongst all these people, not getting the respect, not getting a reciprocated relationship, and how much that is really impacting him.
Yeah, all really good points, to be fair. And like I say, Kevin is just not happy with what's going on. But it is interesting how they're going all in on stuff with Kevin on this episode, aren't they? Like you say, how people seem to be perceiving him. We'll see a little bit later, some very not nice things that he does, because before in previous episodes we've spoke about how, I don't know, in one moment he might do something and you think, oh, okay, well that's quite a nice thing to do, or the good thing to do, but then he'll go and beat someone up or do so, or abuse his power and that kind of thing, and you're like, okay, they're showing us quite conflicting things. But in this episode, they're kind of going all in on Kevin, to be fair. But so outside, we'll see a little bit more of Kevin with his dad, because he's outside having a cigarette, and Garvey Senior goes to join him, and his dad knows that something's up with Kevin, and Kevin asks him that, why isn't it enough? Garvey Senior says that every man kind of rebels against the idea that their life, as it is with their family, is all that it is, but he tells him that Kevin has no greater purpose because it is enough. And it's funny, to hear him saying that. Garvey Senior is saying about how this is all there is to life and there is no greater purpose, and you compare that with how he is now, and it's just how times change.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite on the nose saying like Kevin doesn't have a purpose, and then is it in the second or third episode? It's a very Kevin even quite clearly goes, "So now I have a purpose." You know, kind of it's quite a strong kind of link there, even though it's almost 3 years time difference between that statement and the next statement. It's quite a strong. So now I have a purpose after all this time. You've told me I didn't, and now I do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the themes running through this episode are definitely really strong, and like I say, not so subtle at times. They will kind of beat you over the head with it, but I think after 8 episodes of pretty much pure mystery, having things come together a little bit more is definitely welcome. But so after the party, Laurie tells Kevin that she actually started crying at the breeders. And to me, I thought that Kevin kind of brushed it off a little bit, kind of brushing off her worries, and he just says, no, it's fine, because she says that she doesn't think they should get the dog. And he's like, no, let's go ahead and get it. And he's kind of like, instead of saying, okay, well, why was you upset? He just kind of just wants to move on, not talk about it. But then in the next shot of Kevin, when he's on his own, when Laurie's still asleep, we see him and he's literally just got his head in his hands. I mean, it's just a perfect microcosm of these guys. Like, just, let's not talk about issues, pretend everything's fine, but we know Laurie's not fine, and clearly Kevin isn't.
Yeah, exactly. I think her talking about, crying at the breeders was quite an obvious opener to talk about the actual problem. About her being pregnant, for example, and talking about feeling overwhelmed. And I was surprised that Kevin didn't pick up on that kind of, actually something we need to talk about. Instead, just tries to immediately smooth it over. We'll get a dog. We'll, make the kids happy tomorrow. And you're right. I think it's quite an interesting, complete skip over something so important, and how he's just not picking up what she's putting down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little bit frustrating that Laurie doesn't kind of out and out say what's on her mind, and it goes back to what Sam was saying. They keep a lot of stuff on the surface, and they're playing happy families, if you like. But I mean, I could almost see Kevin's point. She's getting a bit overly emotional about getting a dog, and she's conflicted. Like, I don't know. Like, he's clearly got other stuff on his mind, and it's probably easy to see why he doesn't pick up on that. And he's just like, no, it's fine. He's still being a quite reassuring husband at this point of the surface, perhaps.
I mean, look, I think we've all done that kind of thing, haven't we? Like, no one's perfect when, someone's got an issue and go, no, it's fine. Like, not quite the man up kind of thing, but, it's like, no, it'll be all right. Don't worry about it. But I don't know. It is one of them that, like, Laurie doesn't come out and say, okay, I'm pregnant straight away, but she is starting the conversation by saying, I got upset, and I don't think Kevin even asks her why she got upset. Like, he just
presumes,
like,
doesn't it?
Yeah, he's just like, oh no, everything will be fine. Let's get the dog. We're fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a. If you just said, I don't feel very well, it's kind of if you found out, your partner had broken down crying for over a relatively, what you assume would be like a relatively minor thing, like, well, I know Kevin didn't turn up to the dog breeder, so maybe that's why he was trying to gloss it over so quickly, because he thinks that she's upset because he didn't turn up, maybe.
Yeah.
Without a real explanation, because we know that Kevin hasn't told Laurie that he couldn't attend because he was picking Tom up from his biological father's house. And I did kind of try to see it from that angle, if that's why he tries to gloss it over, but the fact he does gloss over someone going, I got overwhelmed and started crying, that's a very big, that's a huge red flag to anyone.
Just one of the many things that doesn't reflect very well on Kevin in this episode.
Yeah.
But so in the next scene, we see Laurie and Tom have a little one-on-one. I think for the first time, and it's pretty funny actually when she says about getting thug life, getting tattooed on her neck, and Tom tells her the truth. So I've just thought of this as I've said it now. So Tom telling her the truth. And, we've seen Jill kind of not keep any secrets. Like, the kids are doing things better than the adults. Like in this episode, something's happened, and he hasn't told her straight away, but maybe it's because it was the day of the party. But the next morning, he does tell her. So, fair play to him for that. Like I say, setting a better example. But so the truth I'm talking about is about going to see his biological dad. And Tom kind of suggests a little bit that, he'll be all right, and, maybe bottling things up. And Laurie tells him, like, not to do that, because she knows as a professional that doesn't work. Which, I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but that is kind of like what the Guilty Remnant do. They literally don't speak. They just say the world ended and everything. And it's like, so Laurie's completely, like, done a 180 on that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so then... on another run, Kevin doesn't cut the shit like Garvey Sr. told him to, and he stops and has another cigarette. And then there's a weird moment when a car's driving past and they stop, and there's 4 women in there, and they ask him if he's ready. But they've got him mixed up for another one because he's like, what are you on about? And they just drive off. And then, again, another really weird thing. Kevin sees, like, a sewage cover start to shake, and then it kind of dies down, and then it just completely blows up. Like, goes absolutely flying off into the air. And I'm not going to lie, completely forgot that happened, and it did proper make me jump.
To be honest, this point is one that I want to hone in on the most, this episode, because I found this really kind of creepy, and I think there's a lot actually going on, although on the surface it doesn't look like a lot. So, I mean, you've got a car full of older ladies now. So, I mean, it is creepy, the fact that they say, are you ready? And they get him mixed up with someone else. It makes you think, who were they after? That tying in what Patty was saying about the end of the world, the fact that they just come up, it did make me think that there's some sort of... otherworldly entity, and I know I seem to say this about anything that's a bit strange now, but I don't think on the surface that's just they're just looking for someone, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just the fact that the craziest thing that's probably ever happened in human history happens the day after, and that they're saying, are you ready? And they drive off. It's very
I think it's on this day, isn't it? This is the 14th.
Yeah. Sorry. It's at the end of the day, isn't it? It's just very crazy. And then you've got that going on, and I presume we get no answers. But with the manhole cover being blown off, the very clear hell imagery. Hell coming from below, and it's all coming up out the surface. And you could also tie it in with Kevin's bottled up emotion, and the lid coming off, if you like, and maybe even the universe. The universe is, I don't know, like, has it had enough? Is the lid coming off? Have they run out of space? I mean, I'm just theorising on reasons why people disappeared, but they wouldn't have put that scene in for no reason. I don't think it's just, some people got Kevin confused with someone else, and there's a foot down there in the sewers. Because it's literally fire coming out.
Yeah, you see a small amount of fire as the explosion pushes the lid off.
Yeah. So Anta, I do like your point about how that sewage cover blowing off can be like a bit of imagery for like what happens to people when they bottle up their emotions, and then it all just comes out at one and it just explodes. I like that point on it. I just wanted to tell you.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
That was like a nice bit of cheese melted on top of the burger. Do you know what I mean? Game changer.
What's your guys' take on that scene?
So I initially saw it as, the thing. So it's similar to you. I thought the lid blowing off was quite literally Kevin repressing his emotions. That's how I initially saw it. In hindsight, you're kind of right with saying how strange it is that these old this group of women kind of go, oh, are you ready? And then passing him over, and then 10 seconds later we see fire. A bit of almost hell imagery. And I hadn't really thought about it like that, because who else could they have been looking for? A man smoking at the side of the road after a run. So you're right, there is quite... initially only really thought about the repressed emotions and the bottling up and them exploding. But there is something else there, and you're right, it is very strange.
How many ladies are in the car?
Four. There are 4 people in the car.
I literally just thought, the four horsemen, 4 horse ladies of the apocalypse.
Horsewomen,
I would like to come back to this point in around 15 weeks' time.
Make a note, someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just log that down.
Yeah. As George
What's your
R. R.
take
Martin.
on the scene, Sam?
Well, like I say, there's something that happens in a later episode, which I'd like to come back to. Yeah, so I don't want to say too much about this scene because I think it's something that we might come back to in a good few episodes' time. So I'll just, as George R. R. Martin says when he gets asked about the future of the A Song of Ice and Fire books, I'll just say, keep reading. Just keep reading. But so next, Kevin goes home and he starts to tell Laurie the story about what's happened. He says, quote, "You'll never believe what just happened to me." But before she even knows what's happened, before he even gets a story out, you could tell Laurie is just thinking about the fact that Kevin smoked because you can clearly smell it on him. And, and I think the reason why she's already annoyed at him is because she knows about what Kevin did with Tom's biological dad and the fact that he didn't mention anything to her. And Laurie asks Kevin pretty much directly if his place is at home with them, and Kevin says that, "No, you don't want me to be honest." And then he really spitefully says that yeah, I smoked and I don't want a dog. And I don't know, just there's quite a lot of venom in what he says. And he kind of blames Laurie and just says, "Yeah, well, the reason why I didn't tell you is because you wanted it," and tries to make out that everything's just about her. And again, it's just it's just not good, man, from Kevin. It's really not good at all. And I know we spoke earlier about, maybe some of the problems that they've had might seem just even worse because we know what's going on, but it really hasn't taken much here for these two. I don't know, you can just tell that their relationship, you can tell it's pretty much clearly done at this point, because to be fair, I was thinking earlier when we were saying about, a few things that they're kind of keeping from each other, and you could maybe say that about Tom and Kevin or whatever, but Laurie's keeping a pregnancy from him. Something that you'd need support on and everything. So yeah, all of this is to say, yeah, this is not good from Kevin at all.
No, I think it's the first time you actually see them actually addressing the conflict, almost, if that makes sense. We've seen signs that there's problems, but it's the first time it's actually come to a head. And you're right, I was surprised at how quickly, Laurie moved on from Kevin's it's a near-death experience is what Kevin is describing, isn't it? Because he's talking about, this thing landed, not 10 foot away from me, which is pretty scary considering, that would have killed him. It's the fact she completely skips over that is quite interesting. And then I quite like, again, considering the relevance dogs play in later episodes. Sorry, in earlier episodes. Sorry, I always get this time thing wrong.
Later chronologically, but earlier episodes, yeah.
Kind of actually how important dogs are, and this is quite interesting to say, actually, Kevin doesn't want a dog. He doesn't want one. He's only doing it because Laurie wants one. And then you actually see, well, he does actually end up getting a dog later on anyway, but it's some kind of, beast from hell by the looks of it. Some hellhound kind of creature, not the cute, cuddly, fluffy thing that Laurie wanted to bring home earlier on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting, that kind of dynamic straight up. And the fact he turns and goes "fuck you," that's pretty. That's quite. How much venom was in that going "fuck you, Laurie"? I was like, whoa. That's...
I mean, I'll come on to that in the next bit, but yeah, no, definitely agreed.
Unbelievable.
What are you saying, Ab?
I think they're both to blame for the breakdown in the marriage, but I think Kevin's more to blame, if you like. So Laurie's no angel. Whether she's been driven to that state of behaviour by Kevin is obviously not that clear. But I mean, we know how the episode ends with Laurie, and you think, I don't know, is it enough to make her join a death cult? She seems, she's a psychologist at the end of the day, isn't she? So she's an expert on these kind of things. So it's really interesting to see a relatively strong character, a put together character, with the loss of her baby and everything going on with her family, to abandon her kids and join the GR. It's crazy to see. But yeah, just about Philip, it's very on the nose, isn't it? About getting a dog, and we know how dogs play into a massive part in all the episodes, whether it be barking to point them out towards the National Geographic magazine or right in the end of the very first episode. It's pretty crazy.
So Kevin then gets a phone call, and it's about this deer that we've heard so much about already. And to be fair, Laurie pretty much just spells out what the deer symbolism has meant the whole time by talking about how it's trapped and you better go save it. And that is just it. That is your answer just there. All this question about symbolism and everything. Kevin is the trapped deer, running rampant, doing strange things, acting out. You know, he feels trapped in his own life. We can kind of see that from what he's saying to his dad earlier on. You know, that's it really. Like, she spelled it out. Kevin gets a phone call, and it turns out that it's about the deer that we've seen like running rampant earlier in the episode. And he's got quite like a bit of a smirk on his face. Like, you know, he's quite happy that he's got a phone call about this deer, but Laurie pretty much spells out to everyone in the audience exactly what's going on with all this deer symbolism by saying about how it's trapped and you better go save it. And that's just it. Kevin is the trapped deer, running rampant, you know, acting out, doing strange things because it feels trapped in its life. And so, again, there is still a lot of mysteries in this episode, but they've cleared that one up for her. So, and that's why Kevin seems to have this connection with the deer, you know, seeing it when he goes out on runs, all that kind of thing. And again, like Phil said earlier, Kevin is fucking horrible when he just says like, "Fuck you, Laurie." Like, you know, there's some things like no matter what problems you've got in a relationship, everything, like, there's just no need to speak to anyone like that. Do you know what I mean? Particularly your wife. But yeah, again, not good from Kevin at all. But so he goes over to the house where the deer's been running rampant, and it's the people from the earlier episode that we see with Nora, where the child with Down syndrome departed, when she's asking them the questions for their benefit check. And the deer's upstairs, and it's still acting out, and animal noises like that just... I don't know, I hate hearing them, so it's making just like proper horrible noises. But then it just bursts out the door and charges outside and gets hit by a lady who's driving a car. And Kevin goes and basically puts it down, puts it out of his misery. And so I'm just there thinking, so if Kevin is the deer, you know, if they are linked, what does this say about Kevin? And so it's just making me think, if Kevin is the deer and they seem to be linked, and you know the deer symbolises Kevin, what does this scene say about Kevin, you know, and the way that his story's going? You know, he's acting out, and then he runs out, gets run over, and then gets put down, you know, put out of his misery almost. I'd be interested to hear your guys' opinions on that. So Phil, come at me with it.
So the first thing that really struck me is when he goes out to see the deer that's been hit by the car. It is nearly identical to his dream in the first episode where he hits a deer with the car. So, you know, it's bang on. It's the way the deer looks, everything, the way the legs are splayed out. It's identical. So it's quite a poignant shot that they do from it, and also the way you see Kevin reflected in the deer's eyes. I find it hard not to get the impression it's supposed to be him, because you see Kevin really clearly in the deer's dying eyes. And the fact, you know, then goes and puts it out of its misery. I was there like, and then and after that, that's when you see the real change. That's when he starts going off and, you know, goes away with the young woman back to the hotel. That first kind of clear break on the Kevin we've seen has been trying to hold it all together prior to this scene, and then the Kevin we have now, who, you know, will go away with some young woman, you know, back to her hotel, because he must have known, I think, from the outset that something else was going to be going on. So I find it hard not to think the deer is supposed to be representing Kevin in some way.
Sure.
I was a bit... It kind of almost ruined it a little bit. And actually, as I say this, I realise this is a point you talk about in the next paragraph, not this one. But the balloon kind of spoiled the mystical element to the deer for me slightly. So, you know, when you see it standing in the woods earlier and it's almost shining and it's, you know, it's beautiful. And actually, I think it's actually just the balloon that would have been reflecting the light.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of a bit of a comeback to reality in a certain way. Yeah. Instead of it being this mystical and potentially divine deer, to actually just being, oh no, it just had a balloon strapped to its head.
It is like that, isn't it, with this program where they'll kind of heavily suggest something supernatural and then give you an explanation for it, but it still makes you think, well, hold on, like, you know, no. What about what you just showed us for the last 10 minutes? You know,
all really good points, Phil. I suppose it's a bit of a cop-out answer. I'm not really sure what my conclusion is at this stage. I don't know whether it's kind of Kevin putting to bed. So this happens. This is the very first thing that happens chronologically, isn't it? Episode-wise, and he kills the deer, right?
What do you mean? Sorry.
So in this episode, episode 9, is the very first episode chronologically out of everything we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And he kills the deer, but you see the deer in episode 1.
It's slightly different deer.
Well, it's obviously not the same deer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the deer you see in the first deer you see in episode 1 doesn't have the antlers on it. I think the one standing outside the woman's house, the person who owns the dog's house, I don't think that one has antlers, but then the one he sees later on does have antlers.
Okay, so I suppose him killing this deer, it's about him potentially, I don't know, cutting out a part of his life or just accepting his destiny almost. I'm not 100% sure on the link, but it just begs the question: are the follow-up deers kind of reflections of that deer, or apparitions, if you like, or are there literally multiple deer following Kevin around?
Well, I think, like you say, you know, it's very tough to draw a conclusion. I think for me, it just kind of suggests that things are going a bit of an ominous way for Kevin, and you know, if his story carries on this kind of trajectory, that he might meet a similar end. Not that he'll get literally run over, but you know, metaphorically. Sure. So we see Laurie. She's in a car, but she's not really driving anywhere. She's just kind of pulled over. She's looking very reflective, and we see the lady from the pilot, like the very first scene, with Sam the baby in there. She kind of pulls up, and again, like, you know, everything's kind of coming together a little bit. There is a little bit of what do they call it, like small world syndrome going on with this, where it's like everything is linked, everybody kind of interacted with each other before, which I could kind of take it or leave it, to be fair. But again, it's another thing with Laurie seeing a baby. I mean, like, you know, there is... They are beating you over the head with it, like, to be honest. Again, the balloon on the deer. Come on.
Yeah.
But
I never made the link between Laurie seeing the baby and her thinking about her pregnancy. So that's a good catch up. I never thought of that. I think the probably biggest thing is the fact that the balloons say it's a girl, which is what Christine says after she gives birth at the end of Solace for Tired Feet, and whether that's a direct link there.
I think it is, and I think it's an exceptionally good spot.
I think it must be. But then also, say if we was to put that point to one side and think what else it could mean, whether it be referring to Laurie's pregnancy. I mean, it might be a bit of a stretch, because that's a balloon that you would give someone who's just given birth. So there's that aspect to it. But sorry, my final point on what the balloon could mean. I mean, he does literally bump into a girl, another woman, and then, you know, it could just be really obvious. It's a girl, like, you know, I mean, it's not as good as the other 2 points, but you know, I'm trying to. He's
talking to a woman. It's a girl.
No, but it's almost like, here she is. Go do something. You know, I don't know.
Let's move on. But so Laurie's at the doctor's office, and she runs into Mary in the waiting room, and Matt's there getting checked out. And Mary says that she would rather go in with Matt to the doctor's room together, as she'd rather than be afraid together. And you can just see the look on Laurie's face, because, you know, even though Matt's not letting Mary do that, that's what she wants to do. And you could tell that just resonates with Laurie, because, you know, her and Kevin aren't facing anything together. You know, they're just doing things basically completely separately, completely separate issues, and just not even discussing them. And you can just see the look on Laurie's face and the way that resonates with her, because even though Mary isn't fully facing it with Matt, because she's not in the room with him, at least she's there, at least he's, you know, open and honest with her. And Laurie and Kevin are just such a far away from that, you know, like they're not even telling each other anything.
Yeah, exactly. You can see she couldn't share the fact she's pregnant with Kevin, and I think by using the terms, we're running out of options, I suspect that you hear the doctor say earlier on in the episode. I think she's considering aborting this fetus, and that's quite a big step, a decision to make by yourself, to not even consult or even mention it to Kevin. And it just exactly you said, it just shows how far apart they've grown, how they're just not talking at all with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do love how all the characters are getting linked in pre-departure. I think it's a great bit of world building. But what is a really depressing point is when, after Matt gets his results back, and it is good news, he says, I'll get drunk. He wants to celebrate, and then tells Mary, you drive. And we know that's the accident that leads to her paralysis. So, it's very much doom and gloom, isn't it? But like I say, if this was episode 1, you think, like everything's good in the world, but because we know what happens, it's like, oh my God, almost like don't say it.
Yeah.
But,
you're absolutely right. It kind of, again, shows how much Matt would have gone through, because he went through, within what I'm assuming a very short period of time, at the absolute high of, I don't have the cancer hasn't come back, let's go celebrate, let's go have a great time, to what we know will happen is that his world will completely change, not just because of the departed, but because his wife becomes paralyzed, has this lifelong affliction now that will go on forever. So it's quite an interesting high that he would have left the doctor's surgery on, to where we know he'll be in what will be a few minutes, actually.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic kind of drop, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so Kevin's sharing a cigarette with the woman who ran over the deer, and to be honest, you can just tell just from the way he's kind of looking her up and down, like exactly what he's thinking. And then when she says that she isn't local and that she's just staying in a hotel, you're just like, okay. Kevin thinks it's game on now, and someone else offers her a lift, and Kevin, oh yeah, what a nice guy. He's like, no, I'll give her a lift. Yeah, Kevin, come on, man, what are you doing, son?
Exactly.
You're a married man.
Yeah, he's still married, exactly. What I thought was quite good and slightly on the nose here was when she gets her cigarette out and like goes to light it, and then when Kevin looks at her, and I think she thinks that he's judging her for smoking, she goes, yeah, I know, I'm going to hell. And I was quite there like, well, funny you should mention that. That kind of...
Very on the nose.
Yeah, again, very on the nose.
Mate, how many times have we said on the nose in this episode?
3 or 4, mate?
You listen back, mate. I think I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I reckon we're probably pushing 15 now.
I think
it's a direct hit. It's a bullseye.
Yeah, I mean,
hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Phil, when I actually watched the episode, I never actually made the link there, because I was watching it in real time and didn't know she was going to disappear at that point. But, I think it's a... Well, I'm always frightened to speak. I wanted to say, what we just referred to. But, like, it's obvious, even though she's not local, she must have heard the rumours about the man jogging round. She's thinking, right, hot cop in the uniform.
Oh, yeah, she would have twitched that hotel curtain when he was running past, She knows. He's not wearing the Ray-Bans, though, is he? I just thought about this. He's not wearing the Ray-Bans.
If he was, she wouldn't even, like, look like she have mercy. So at Nora's home, it's breakfast time and the kids are playing up, and just a little point that Nora's looking pretty much at the end of her tether with all this. And then at a science fair at the school, Jill tells Tom that she thinks Kevin's going to leave Laurie, basically.
What I didn't really notice it until this bit in the episode, but Tom couldn't be more of a different person here. Like, he's joking, he's trying to cheer up. Jill said something that's quite... it'd be quite a big impact on a child to kind of go, oh, I think my dad might leave. And Tom's already been through this once before, as we know, with Michael. But, it's the fact, like, he tries to joke, tries to cheer her up, and then, then goes, oh, yeah, we'll make a circuit, kind of make her smile and get back involved. And I'm not sure if either this is a really good thing on Tom's part, that, he's trying to take her mind off it and trying to inject a bit of life and humour back into her life after what she realises is quite a tragic thing, or if this is exactly what Kevin's been doing. Yeah, exactly. Like Kevin just immediately trying to gloss something over and make it all seem different. Now in this scene, I got it as more of I initially thought of it as being quite positive, trying to distract a younger sibling from quite a tragic issue. Whereas with Kevin's scene, I immediately perceived it as just Kevin trying to gloss over a major problem between he and his wife. So I'd be interested to see if you think A, he's doing the same thing as Kevin, and B, if he's in the right for doing this with Jill, whereas we've been condemning Kevin for doing something similar with Laurie.
Well, I think the context is a little bit different because they are out in a public place, at an event. Maybe it's not the time to be like, okay, let's have a full-on discussion with it. So I think it's tough, isn't it? Like so many things in life, it's not just a case of, okay, is he right or wrong? I think with Kevin, I don't know, I come down more firmly on Kevin. I think just because, they're in a private place, because they're married, I don't know, a couple's closer than siblings, I'm not sure. And also because he's an adult, and I know Tom is, he's not a child, but he's still not a full-grown man yet, particularly in kind of like an emotionally mature way. Yeah. So I think for me, it's more like you're seeing the early onsets of it, of not directly coming at things and being like, no, everything's fine, let's go do something else. But so you do like Tom for it in a way, but then when you're thinking about it and you're like, yeah, this isn't the best thing to be doing. What do you reckon?
For me, I just thought Tom was just a reassuring older brother, really. And I don't think there was any games being played. He was just, she's questioning that our parents going to stay together, and he's just like, no, it'll be fine, like.
Well, I'm not saying that games are being played or anything like that, but maybe that, he thinks that this is the best thing to do because maybe he's seen his dad doing it. And, he's kind of learning off Kevin, but he's not learning the right thing to do,
But I mean, you imagine you're a 14-year-old and you think the parents have got problems, and then you ask your older sibling, do you think the parents are going to split up? The older sibling you would think, would always probably say, because they want to, protect the family and ease the child, if you like, no, it'll be fine.
No, I get that. I'm not coming down on Tom for it. I'm just saying that, that link is definitely there between what we've seen Kevin doing and the way that Tom's kind of dealing with the situation. Yeah. So Kevin then drives the lady to the hotel, and she asks him if he's a good guy. And initially, after being like, "What?" No, his answer is no, I'm not. And she invites him in, and of course, the way that he's already been looking at her, he's not going to refuse. So he's heading right in there.
Yeah, she must have spotted his wedding ring because, I think the only reason you would ask that question, are you a good guy, is if they were married and they'd be cheating, because otherwise she could think he was single, So yeah, she must have spotted the ring, which isn't really shown, but I'm not sure he is wearing a ring.
He is wearing a ring. Yeah,
you can infer that. You can definitely infer that.
Sure, yeah.
But I think it's quite. And I know. We're looking at this purely from is he a good person? As in, it's kind of her way of opening up the question as to whether he would, if she invited him in, would he come? Double entendre. But there's sorry guys, had to bring it in. Phrasing.
That's the level we've reached.
But actually, if you think throughout this whole episode, actually, based on Kevin's actions purely in this episode, he's not a good person. He beats up Michael whilst dressed as a police officer. Actually, what else does he do? He
says "fuck you" to Laurie.
Yeah, to the woman he loves. Yeah, exactly. He kind of does several. He does several things which would indicate him being a bad person. I know we always see him from his point of view trying to do the right thing, but actually, here he hasn't been. He's been lying to his wife about giving up smoking. He's been lying about wanting a dog.
It's probably a stretch not to call him a good person at this stage, just based on this episode itself, though, I would probably argue. Because he does still do good things, like he rushes into the school when the deer's there. Like, I don't know. It is a bit grey for me.
I see what you're saying, but I think definitely in previous episodes he's done good things and then bad things, and like it has come across as pretty grey, despite the bad things being, really not good things. But I think for me in this episode, I feel like they're definitely leaning into the darker side of things.
Yeah.
And there's not so much redeeming there, because I think most people would run to help out at the school, and also if you're a police officer, it's your job. But then when it comes down to actually just being a good person, with your family and that kind of thing, like it's... Yeah. I'm not saying he's like full on like, Sauron in spiky armour and like, he's the literal devil or anything. But
he does make an effort to understand Jill by listening to the video. He does give a good speech at the party. A heartfelt speech. So I don't know. I'd probably back him up a little bit.
Okay, that's fair. And we do, as Sam said, we do see him as a bit of a grey character later on, doing good things and then doing bad things. But the bad things he does later on is always explained by the kind of pressure he's under. Kind of lost respect. Yeah, like he's cracking. And maybe that's why we see cracks earlier on in this episode on the wall. Maybe to show the first signs of him breaking as a person. But I did take that because, again... fantastic acting, because he even kind of, when she asked the question, you kind of see him like kind of pause for a moment, and then you kind of see his lip quiver slightly, and you can kind of see that real conflict in his mind. And that's why I thought, well, actually, if you think back, this episode, I would say net-wise, without any real provocation, he's done several things wrong. But then I did also kind of have to laugh when, considering she's inviting a married man into her hotel room, and Kevin's just as guilty of doing this, but the fact she thinks she's going to hell over smoking makes me kind of wonder what she's, where she's going.
Yeah, you go to hell for smoking, and now you're about to sleep with a married man. So, what's the punishment going to be for that?
Yeah.
Or killing the deer. Maybe she thinks I'm going to hell for killing the deer, perhaps. I don't know.
That's a bit of a mercy kill, and the deer did, I don't blame her for what happened with the deer. Because it came out of nowhere. And then Kevin's the one who actually kills the deer. Again, I saw that as a mercy killing, though, rather than... than any kind of immoral action.
Sure.
But yeah, just to think.
That's it. Something to think about. Can't wait to see what happens next. But so Laurie's now in with the doctor, and for those who haven't already worked out, given the numerous foreshadowing that was earlier in this episode, yep, she's indeed pregnant, and the baby is thankfully perfectly healthy, and the music starts kicking in at this point, and for anyone who's watched the previous episodes, you know which bit of music I'm talking about, and I tell you what, like it's. Every time it just comes in, it makes me feel emotional. I don't know if it's just because I like this program so much, but it's just such a dramatic piece of music. It, kind of gives me goosebumps whenever it comes in.
Yeah, it certainly sends shivers, doesn't it? This whole sequence, and it's the real climax of the episode.
And once that bit of music comes in, that things are about to start happening. So then we get a glimpse of all our main characters in this episode. So Jill and Tom are making the circuit in the science fair, and everyone's got their hands linked. Nora is at home with the kids who are still playing up, and she gets a call about the job that she was interviewing for earlier. But when the kid spills orange juice on the phone, and she like shouts at the kid, and it turns out that's the last thing that she said to them, just shouting at them. Kevin's there getting it on with this other lady, cheating on Laurie. Laurie's there getting a scan. The baby is healthy, but she might still be feeling conflicted because of the choice about the options. And then as all that's happening, we hear first a scream at the science fair, and then you see the light from the circuit go off because the circuit's broken, because one person in that circuit's missing. And then Nora realises that things have gone really quiet, and Kevin's now in bed alone, and fucking hell, Laurie's baby's disappeared off the screen. I mean, that with Laurie, like, it, obviously you don't see anything happen, but obviously you know what's happened, and it just does not get any easier to watch, like, every time you watch it. And you know what, we spoke about Laurie before and the way she's conflicted and all this kind of thing, and maybe not understanding exactly why she's made the choices that she had. But for me, just seeing this now, I mean, Ant's used the word harrowing before in this episode, and I think it's really fitting for this, because imagine if that happened to you. It would just mess you up so badly. And it's just a brilliant scene. It's just a brilliant scene, the whole thing, and yeah, it's great.
I think why the scene is so impactful, not only have you got all the main characters, but they don't show anyone actually disappear. So Laurie's looking at the monitor. You see the aftermath of Kevin looking in the bed sheets. You see the circuit failing, and I think very easily they could have shown a bit of CCTV or a bit of footage from YouTube or something, showing people disappear. But they almost don't reduce themselves to that. They just show the characters and how they respond to the departure.
Mate, that's brilliant. I love that, because I am piggybacking off that, because like I've said earlier, the program isn't about the actual departure itself, it's about the aftermath of it. So it's great not to show it and to focus on the characters as it's happening. Sorry, I know I've cut in again, but I just wanted to reaffirm that point there.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I'll wear that like a badge of honour. I need that confidence boost. But the you hear a scream, don't you? And yes. I don't think we did see the reaction, to be fair, in the pilot with the lady and Sam the baby. The panic and stuff. But imagine if someone literally just disappeared in front of your eyes. Clothes and everything going at the same time. It's pretty crazy. And with Laurie looking at the monitor, and obviously the fetus disappears. I mean, it's really
does not bear thinking about, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And then we get the extra context with Nora as well. Is that it's not just that a family disappeared, but a family disappeared when things weren't great with the husband, and the kids were getting on her nerves, and she looked like she was sick of it. And the last thing she did was shout at one of them for spilling a bit of orange juice. I mean, imagine you're literally just there, you scream at your kids, you go off, trying to sort your phone out, and you turn around and they're gone. Fuck off, man. Oh my god. Yeah,
you'd feel awful, wouldn't you? Like the last thing I said, or the last, the thing you always hear is people saying, I wish I had a chance to say goodbye or let them know how much I loved them.
Yeah.
But can you imagine the last thing you did was, understandably, I fully understand Nora's frustration.
Yeah.
So I don't think she's a bad person for it. It's completely understandable. But can you imagine the guilt you would feel after that? The last thing they would have heard is you screaming and shouting at them.
Yeah, it's like being master of hindsight, isn't it? I mean, she was getting a call about a job, and a load of orange juice went on the phone, rendering it, useless. I mean, I mean, if you would know that, 2% of the world's population would go, and your entire family inside that 2%, you'd be proper chilled all the time, wouldn't you? And just savouring every moment. But
I mean, don't get me wrong, I wasn't blaming Nora, but it obviously just adds that extra, that guilt. Extra pain to what happens. Yeah. For our breakdown of the individual points of this episode, so we'll close out as always with giving some of our overall thoughts, and I'll take it away with this one. So what a fantastic episode. And I mean, on rewatch, you realise just how many lines in there, which you think would be just throwaway little lines, just have so much meaning to them, whether it's foreshadowing or reinforcing character points, like all that kind of thing. Like there's almost like no line in there that doesn't have some sort of extra meaning. And obviously this episode doesn't advance the plot in any way as it's set in the past, but it just gives so much context to the characters and still adds to the mysteries and the symbolism, whilst giving us an answer about some things like the deer, for example. And I feel like we're a little bit spoilt with this one because, we've had character-focused episodes before with Nora and Matt, but we've got one here and it's, you're getting more about everyone. Literally, I don't think there's one person who's been in the previous episodes, maybe like Christine and Holy Wayne. We don't hear anything more about them, but a lot of the main cast, we're developing more of an understanding to them. It's enriching their story. We get a glimpse of Tom's feelings about his biological dad. We see Jill be happy for the whole episode until obviously the very end, which makes, you see how she is now and you just feel really sad about that and you want her to be happy again. We see that Kevin was having problems, seemingly potentially maybe with his mental health, but definitely in his relationship even back 3 years ago. And again, I just want to point out again that we see a lot of like bad stuff from Kevin in this episode. Like he's really just not good form from him. So again, that's just something else to contextualize about. And we get also obviously the context about what's happened to Laurie and why she's made the decisions that she's made. And I know that might be a little bit of a ramble from me, but I just wanted to make those points again for one last time, because it's just an absolutely fantastic episode. Sure,
totally agree. I mean, the title of the episode, Garveys At Their Best, it's also sarcastic. It's all on the surface, isn't it? They all seem to be happy. I was going to say that the episode doesn't advance the plot too much. Obviously, you've got the reveal about Laurie probably being the biggest thing. But in terms of where we are present day, it doesn't give you too much more. It just gives you a richer backstory and makes the world and the in-universe much more developed and furthers our interest there. So I thought that was good. And I think we really did need the episode, especially with Laurie and Jill, as I mentioned earlier. And also, I mean, to be fair, with all the characters, really, to see how Matt was different before, Tom, etc. You can just can really gain a lot of information from this episode. But I think for me, I say this at the end of every bloody roundup, don't I? But I really like the otherworldly aspects of it, whether it be the traffic light moment or me thinking that people are demons and all the rest of it. But the car full of women for me is definitely one of those moments, and the balloon on the deer saying it's a girl on the manhole cover. And we get all of that even though it's pre-departure as well, which infers it wasn't like the departure was the beginning of all the messed up stuff. It was happening before, and whether they're mutually exclusive or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, just to echo Sam, really, fantastic world building in the episode and enough juicy meat for us to talk about for 3 hours or however long this has been so far.
Yeah, I've got to echo everything that you've both said, as you've already kind of covered. And what I really liked about this episode was that I always thought that kind of October the 14th was the start of everything. I thought that's when everything went wrong. And actually this episode highlights that no, things were going wrong before that. Manhole cover, as you've said, and Laurie being pregnant, the kind of collapse in everyone's relationship prior to the 14th was actually, I think that was a fantastic idea, great way to set it up. And I also quite like the fact that I think you could have, if they wanted to, they could have put this episode as the first episode of the season, and it would have fit in quite well. But the fact they've moved it to episode 9, made it the 9th episode in the season, it doesn't really advance the plot, as you said, but still kind of gives us so much, especially as episode 8 ended on a cliffhanger of, we know something's about to happen on Heroes Day, so going back in time now, is quite a pace change, if that makes sense.
They love leaving you on the little tease as well.
Exactly, they've left us on a tease, but they, as I said, they could have put this at the start and it would have worked, but putting it here has had just such a bigger impact. And it's even just things like the picture covering over the cracks, little things like that shows there are problems long before the 14th of October. Yeah. Now, there's something else I wanted to bring up. I thought I'd leave it till the end, and I want to get your impression, and potentially people who are listening in who might be rewatching this, write in and let me know what you think.
Here we go.
But I might, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I noticed that every person who loses someone in the departure wears blue at some point in the episode. So when we first see Laurie, she's wearing blue pajamas. When Kevin obviously wears a blue police uniform. Tom's wearing a blue t-shirt, and he obviously loses his biological dad. Jill's wearing blue, and then the girl who she's holding hands with to make the circuit disappears. So it's kind of noticed, and other characters as well wear blue, like the mum with the baby in the car, and we've mentioned blue being quite important in previous episodes.
Sure.
And I just wondered if there's a link there, because they all wear blue at some point, and then all the people wearing blue lose someone.
Are they wearing blue at the moment of the departure?
Not necessarily. Kevin's naked.
Kevin's not wearing anything.
Kevin's not wearing anything, fam. But Tom, I think, is wearing blue. Jill is wearing blue.
They don't lose anyone.
Laurie, well, Tom loses his biological father. and Jill loses the person she's holding hands with in the circuit, disappears, which may lead to some survivor's guilt afterwards. Just as a little side thought.
I think I'd have to see it again, but I think there's just probably so many people that lose people. So in other words, everyone in the room, everyone in the science room, you would think would lose someone, wouldn't you? And I'm pretty sure they're not all wearing blue.
Well, it's only bear in mind it's only 2%. 2% is actually that's actually not that's not that likely.
Sorry, I thought Ant meant someone in the science room would disappear, but no. Do you know what? Honestly, I'm just not sure on this one at all. Nothing stood out to me. I'm not sure. I'm not denying it. I'm just saying that I'm not really sure what to add to it because I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So I think this is definitely one where if some of the listeners write into us about their theories and then help educate me because I need it.
Clearly. I mean, like sapsreview@gmail.com, Twitter @sapspodcast. I mean, we need help from the viewers, don't we?
Yeah,
I think, like I said, Phil, I'd need to see it again. But considering the role of Blue in the episode with Jill in the fridge and Garvey Senior on his way to be locked up again, there could be something there, but I just don't know enough about it, which I guess isn't giving the listeners too much. But
we'll put a pin in that one for now, and maybe in the future we'll do some sort of like theories episode, and we'll revisit it. I just want to close out the episode just by saying one thing that did make me laugh. That obviously the departure is a horrific thing that has affected so many people in this world. But it did make me laugh how Kevin was looking for the woman that he was sleeping with underneath, like, the thinnest sheet ever.
yeah. I know
tiny sheets. Like, oh, she disappeared under there. I was like, Kevin, what are you doing?
But you just wouldn't act rationally in that moment, would you?
No, I know. But it did make me laugh.
Yeah, same. I did chuckle as well. Like the confusion is like turning the sheets over. Like, oh wait, I thought I was just railing someone. Like, what's going on?
And so with that, I think that brings this supersized episode to a close. It's been
supersized in more ways than one, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that's it. Well, Kevin was involved.
Supersize me.
No. But no, thanks so much as always for joining us, and we'll see you next week for when we close out season 1. And do you know what? That episode's probably going to be a right long one like this one as well. So I hope you enjoy it. Maybe we'll split it up into 2 parts or something. But thanks,
like the Deathly Hallows.
Exactly. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
See you, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.